Welcome to Keys to the Future. I'm your host, Gabby Coe. I've enjoyed a successful engineering career and want to inspire you to remain focused on your STEM education and career. Join me as I chat with amazing guests who are shaping the future and sharing their journeys to inspire yours. Ready to unlock your potential? Let's dive in. Today, we're exploring the power of mentorship, and we are joined by an incredible panel of professionals who have firsthand experience with the power of mentorship in STEM. Dr. Wendy Robello is the National Director of Systems Engineering for Northrop Grumman's Aeronautics Systems sector. Her leadership spans strategy, competitive positioning, and data analytics across space, air, ground, and underwater systems. A mentor and advocate, Dr. Robello founded the Robello California Alliance for Minority Participation Scholarship. Recognized with numerous awards, including induction into the UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame, she holds a Bachelor in Mechanical Engineering from UC Irvine, a Master's in Systems Architecture and Engineering from USC, and a Doctorate in Systems Engineering from the George Washington University. Madhu Komanduri is a Division CIO Director at Northrop Grumman's Space Systems sector, leading strategy and initiatives in infrastructure alignment, digital transformation, enterprise capabilities, and cost optimization. He has spearheaded major enterprise initiatives, including a multi-cloud strategy enhancing cloud security and operations. He mentors technical professionals and volunteers with STEM organizations. Recognized with multiple corporate and industrial leadership awards, Madhu holds a Master's in Computer Science from George Mason University and an MBA from Osmania University, India. Neville Maycock Jr.'s career spans over 23 years in the aerospace industry and is currently serving as a National Director of Avionics Integration at Northrop Grumman's Aeronautics Systems. He leads a team of 650 personnel and oversees the development of advanced defense aerospace programs. He is a recipient of the prestigious 21st Century Trailblazers in Military Aircraft and Aviation Award and the National Society of Black Engineers Distinguished Engineer of the Year Award. Neville holds a bachelor and master's degree in electrical engineering from Florida Institute of Technology and a master's in business administration from Nova Southeastern University. In his free time, he coaches baseball. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today and sharing your expertise and insights with the Keys to the Future community. So STEM is everywhere, and it shapes our daily lives without us even noticing. And as the demand for STEM talent continues to rise, we're facing some key challenges in filling these roles. Let's dive into what those challenges are and why they're contributing to the shortage of STEM professionals today.
One aspect is as you go through the K to 12 ranks, there are more children struggling and falling behind on basic math and science. And once you fall behind, it takes much dedication above their current school workload for years in order to recover. Also, with the school budgets getting tighter year over year, it gets more difficult for economically disadvantaged areas to continue to educate students and get them the knowledge and exposure to STEM careers that's needed to keep kids interested in STEM. Now, moving forward to the collegiate level, I know it was a struggle for me to get my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and it didn't click until my junior year that I needed to work and study with teams in order for me to be successful. Many engineers go through the struggle their first 2 years in college and then decide to drop out. Colleges need to make sure that there's support groups in place that encourage and educate students so they can bounce back quickly from any academic issues.
Absolutely. You mentioned collegiate level. We struggle. I remember struggling also through some of the more challenging courses in engineering and thinking that, oh my gosh, I'm the only one struggling. And in some cases, I hesitated sometimes to ask for help. But that is so important to step forward and ask for help, because there are students that are going through the same kinds of challenges, and just knowing that others are going through the same challenges, you can reach out to professors, to also professor assistants that can help you through the classes. So it's important, I think, for people to realize that there is help and that they're not the only ones having to understand the most challenging topics of STEM. So I do agree with that. And so we're discussing the major challenges contributing to the shortage of STEM professionals. Now let's take a step back and think about the foundation. How can early exposure to STEM education and mentorship play a pivotal role in addressing this gap?
First of all, thank you, Gabby, and it's nice to be on the panel with Wendy and Neville. I think, in my opinion, first of all, one of the most important things I enjoy as part of my professional career is mentoring. And as part of that, I think the STEM mentoring is extremely critical with the industry we are working on, as well as the future innovators that we're looking forward to. I've been a formal mentor with Northrop Grumman for many, many years, and that's I really enjoy talking to a lot of our early career professionals, as well as talking to college graduates, as well as high school students. In fact, some of the key engagements I've been part of have been mostly on the industry panels for STEM conferences. Also had an opportunity to be a part of the University of Maryland, George Mason University on some of the critical STEM topics and supported many hackathons. I think that's where you'll get a lot of critical inputs from the students. Also, it's a learning opportunity. And as well as I actually partnered with my daughter at high school STEM day, which again, they invited us to showcase some of our examples of what we do in space exploration and so on and so forth. My daughter is currently at the Carnegie Mellon University. She's part of the Tepper School of Business, but she's also focused on taking some of the computer science classes. And I can relate a lot of the things she has learned through her journey as part of where she landed in as part of her school. I think, in my opinion, the world is full of opportunities. I think to learn and grow, and early exposure is very, very important. And I'll give you with a specific example. In many schools and colleges, they provide amazing STEM education. But what we can help as mentors, or even for the mentees, the tech companies and the communities can increase the awareness about STEM education as well as making it accessible early in their careers. Like I think previously a lot of the technologies we have learned a little later in the career, but now it's changing. The world is changing, and participating in local STEM events is very critical. And some of my own experiences has been about supporting some of the VEX robotics as well as global cyber education. Some of the mentoring activities have done, as well as kids participating in space camps. I think that this is a growing area that where a lot of the students can learn. We also want to make sure it's an affordable opportunity for a lot of the students that they can afford to. So there's a LinkedIn Learning, is Udemy, Google. There are many, many resources that everyone can use. And I also want to talk a little bit about providing access to mentorship as well as providing access to internships, right? These days, students can do during high school as well as in colleges and things like that. And I also want to mention about a little bit of focus on we're trying to close the gaps on making sure that workforce shortages. I think there is a formal mentoring, there is informal mentoring. And I'll give you an example a little bit about how my own daughter, she started taking advantage of being part of formal mentorship roles and taking advantage, getting some guidance. Also informal mentoring as part of her Tepper School of Business, where she's combining with some of the computer science classes, like coffee chats. Coffee chats is an easy way to talk through that, as well as be part of some of the things like connecting with people informally and start learning more. So I think my point is just to make sure that give enough opportunities for students, whether it's high school, college, or even when they're in early career, that will help in bridge the gap on the demands of the industry.
I absolutely agree, Madhu, with the exposure. I think makes me think of the three E's: education, exposure, and experience. To build, you got to have the education. So that's the K through 12 math subjects, and then the collegiate level, all the subjects that you go through school for. And then through exposure, you get that hands-on experience that is so critical to understand the material that you're absorbing in class, in the classroom. And then the experience, of course, comes later in life when you're actually applying the education and the hands-on exposure that you've had. So while early education is important, hands-on experiences like robotics, like you mentioned, Madhu, and coding camps can make a real difference. How do these experiences shape students and prepare them for successful careers in STEM?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gabby. And again, I really appreciate being on this panel as well. What a superstar panel we have here, exciting topics as well. And as I'm listening to everybody, I just feel like this whole discussion has a full thread, right? And so as I'm thinking about Neville's response about the foundational aspects of K through 12 and having that exposure and how that sets us up for STEM, when I think back, my personal story is I didn't have parents in industry. I didn't have parents in STEM. I didn't have family in STEM. It wasn't discussed. We were very much more of an artistic, music-based family. And so I actually was exposed to STEM unknowingly, quite frankly, because I did play with rockets. My dad and I would get the rocket kits from Michael's or Hobby Lobby or some craft store and bring them home and make rockets. And we'd go out, lived on a military base. We'd go out to the big field and launch rockets, not thinking about the height of the rocket or the projectile or the velocity, just having fun with it. And that exposure was so foundational looking back to really tapping into my curiosity of the world around us and things that you might see on TV or movies. And, when you think about robotics, I really benefited in undergrad doing research as an undergrad in robotics. Again, kind of playing, right? I think about STEM as playing and exposure. And so these, whether it's a science camp or robotics camp, that exposure to students at such a young age, it really does lay the foundation of curiosity and tying things that they see around us in the world every day and then relating it to the STEM aspects. I can think back to, I was a high grade student, if you will, right? I was kind of straight A student growing up in K through 12. But once you got to college, it was a whole different story, whole different ball game. And Neville mentioned a lot of students, especially from underrepresented areas, we don't have that necessarily community, and that community to understand that we aren't alone, right? And I did struggle in undergrad. I did almost not drop out, almost got kicked out because of my grades. I was that student that fell on academic probation, not once, but twice. And I remember thinking back, it wasn't the actual material that was hard. It was the lack of mentorship. It was a lack of community. And once I did find that, similar to Neville in my junior year, and finding that community of, a bunch of students that had similar enough stories to me that said, let's go, it all clicked, right? And that is just so critically important when I think back to all the organizations that have robotics camps, STEM camps, and how that pulls through K through 12, how that pulls through collegiate clubs and organizations. It's really making sure that we're bringing each other along, that we're giving students at large who may not have the opportunity or be exposed to that in their family, in their friend circle, their community, something different. And it allows them to say, that's kind of interesting. I can think back to, I mentioned before, my family, we weren't in STEM. Not only were we not in STEM, we weren't in college, right? So as a kind of the first gen college student, story of me, a lot of that was thanks to high school counselors who said, hey, you need to go take these tests, go do these things. And I remember falling in love with physics, right? I was very much on the art route, going to go into marketing and advertising. And when I took my first physics class, oh my gosh, I fell in love, because then I started thinking, I get to think back to my childhood about rockets. And now I do learn the science behind it. I do learn the math behind it. And having that foundational example of the rockets with my dad as a child, tied to now physics and math that I was strong in, but just didn't click, it made me fall in love. And I remember going back to that high school counselor and saying, hey, I can explain the world around me through math and science. That's pretty cool. And I said, what do I do with my life? And she said, go be an engineer. So, okay, whatever that meant, right? So I didn't know what an engineer was. And the rest is history. So, I just think back to my personal story. And when I look at other students, we go back, because I know all of us go back to our communities and mentor, you can see a lot of the kids in that are in us, right? Or a lot of us in the children. And you start seeing that pull through. And that's why these programs, mentorship, the exposure, it's just so critical to increase the STEM pool at large.
I love that because, the pull through is so critical, like you mentioned. And when you get to work, you're not working by yourself. You have a team of experts, a team of people that have different knowledge, that are bringing their knowledge and their perspectives into the solution space. So that's important to kind of learn early on how to work as part of a team, how to ask for help, being part of a team. So
I really like the excitement, with some of the things that Neville talked about, and Wendy, your own personal experiences. I like the things that you actually experienced with your family. I think it reminds me of some of the STEM day or STEAM day. In fact, my daughter's school calls it as a STEAM day, including science, technology, arts, and of course engineering and math. And when we went there to do some of the like a space exploration experiments, you should see the excitement in the room. I'm just like Wendy, what you just talked about. You talked about arts a little bit, your physics and all those things. A lot of the things we do as part of our innovation, it's not just a technology, but all aspects of the STEM and the STEAM, right? I think you need to have a like a that innovative mindset.
Wendy and I have similar upbringings. My parents, they immigrated from Barbados in the late 60s, early 70s. And because of that, like they weren't exposed to engineering and STEM. So they didn't instill to me, hey, go study engineering and STEM type careers. So for probably the first, like through my K through 12 experience was, well, I'm very smart at math. I'm very good at science. I don't know what to do with any of this, um, but it wasn't until my dad told me, hey, getting ready for college, what do you want to study? And I told him I wanted to do business because in my mind, I was good at math. I can do accounting. Numbers was my thing. He was like, no, I want you to go study engineering. So I went into college totally raw, not understanding what anything engineering was. And it wasn't until probably my sophomore year, it clicked in me, like when he took me to the Sea Air Space Museum in New York and had me take pictures in front of rockets. I'm like, oh, that's something that I could, potentially do. And it was ironic when I got a chance to work on the space shuttle program and I got to stand next to the space shuttle. I'm like, oh, see, Dad, I guess you did a good thing for me there. And now I can showcase my inner nerd and tell myself I'm a rocket scientist now. So a lot of things, just the exposure piece. So I take that experience looking at myself now and I try to make it a lot easier for others to get into the field. So that's why I go off and do like the snap circuits and other STEM type activities just to get kids interested because they may not have the parent at home that has that knowledge or exposure to those types of things.
Neville, I love that story. I look back now, so my dad was Air Force, but working on the space side. My mom worked for the airlines, but she cleaned planes. So we were very much a blue collar enlisted type family. And similar, I look back now at photos of me as a child and I see like the big airplane behind me and not knowing like how serendipitous and foreshadowing get to play with aircraft or I got to play in the space world. And it really is that exposure. It is having that tie. And so to Neville's point, it's just so critical that we make sure that all students have that exposure very early on. His other point is when you are on a certain track, it's much harder to pull out of that and to be prepared for a STEM career because it is hard. STEM is hard, but it's not impossible. And I think the more exposure and community to pull each other together makes it easier.
Thanks for sharing your stories. They are amazing. I could totally relate. I also did not have, a parent at home that was a STEM person. So very humble beginnings. And my mother's vision was for her children to have education and, get out of circumstances. And she told us, you guys have to go to school and learn as much as you can and get good grades. That was her guidance to us. So as with mentors and so on later on in life, I was able to find my path in engineering because of math. I was good at math. Engineering was one of those things that I became passionate about. But of course, all these hands-on experience are incredibly valuable. But mentorship goes beyond that. Why is mentorship such a crucial part of developing successful STEM careers?
All the things I'm hearing, all the stories and the backgrounds, I think that only emphasizes the aspect that why mentoring is so critical. Yeah, Wendy and Neville, you both are right that STEM is not easy. It doesn't come automatically. We have to provide the opportunities. This reminds me my own story. I'm originally from India, and my dad is actually with an accounting background, and my mom was a teacher. and as well as taking care of, we are four brothers back home in India. And one of the things my dad always used to tell me was focus on science and math. Again, this was even before the formalization of STEM as a discipline. I think this was many years ago back home in India. I realized that when I actually traveled to United States for my higher education. And until then, I thought, okay, this is important, but why my dad was emphasizing that for higher education, that really dawned on me why it is critical for us. At that time, we had the IT boom going on in United States, and it was perfect for leveraging all the math background and so on and so forth. It's an important question why mentorship is so crucial. I think from my perspective, mentor and mentee relationship is extremely critical. It could be formal or informal. And I always tell my mentees, in fact, I'm still a mentee too with some of my leaders. We're always learning. I think we need to wear our learning hat all the time, whether it's in space, whether it's in AI, whether it's in cyber, whether it's cloud. For that matter, moving forward, almost it's a confluence of everything happening at the same time. For example, you take part of STEM starting with science. There is tremendous research happening as part of the science in medicine, in space exploration. Now you move to engineering, we do a lot of aerospace work, we do a lot of space work. There is chemical engineering, there is mechanical engineering. And you continue in that aspect of STEM, you move into a little bit more on the technology part of it. And we really need to make sure that we are providing uniform access for those who may not be able to afford, because some of these things could be expensive. And one of the things that we as industry professionals or mentors want to really make sure is that we are providing that access. And you add all these things and build it with technology on top of it. Every part of math applies to any technology we use. I always tell my, I have two daughters, and my wife is an IT professional too. I always tell my older daughter, who's very interested in basketball, even basketball has a lot of math. There is so much data analytics happens, how the players are playing, how we can win. And I talk about basketball because that's my passion. But you take any sport, right? The coaches and the players are constantly figuring out how we can win a particular tournament or a particular game. I think one of the other things I want to talk about is mentors can advise on a lot of training and certification opportunities. These days, not everything is you need to pay. There are some free resources available, but for a lot of the high schoolers, even college going kids, sometimes they're a bit confused. I mean, with AI coming into the play, even for us, it has been a tectonic shift, right? I think we are all dealing with how am I going to apply AI as part of my previously used to have a specialization in each of the areas. With AI coming in, it has become extremely, I don't want to say complicated, but something that how we apply for our respective areas. I do want to emphasize again saying that make sure the mentoring aspect is clearly understood to the mentees, again, to the students or college grads or even early career, and provide them the resources. It's not just give them a list of things to do. I always tell my mentee that let's spend some time on identifying what you want to get out of this. One thing, I keep talking to my daughter that, hey, if you want to do something in Carnegie Mellon, how are you going to use that? She always tells me, Daddy, I want to really learn this. The second thing, I really want to be passionate about it, because if they don't like it, even you show them the rockets or AI technologies, they may not be into it. But once they start liking it and they start becoming passionate about it, and even in this part of our careers, we still want to learn more about. I'm spending a lot of time learning about AI, how we can apply in our respective businesses, right? Our leadership is asking about that. Same thing applies to. We want to make sure that the college students or early career, they want to be passionate about it. And once they are interested, and I know, Wendy, you talked about that, once you started learning some of those things early in your life, then it sticks to your mind, right? Same thing, we want to give those opportunities to a lot of the students here. I know there's plenty of opportunities, but my goal is mentoring is very critical. And I take that very seriously. I'm sure you all do too. Want to make sure that we provide that. Lastly, I want to also mention that we as mentors can help this complicated industry career roadmap. I think not everybody is very clear. This is what I want to do. Even after they get into undergrad, sometimes even then they get masters, they may or may not be very clear on what they want to do. And we as mentors can help provide them a roadmap and give them the options, and then they can choose from that. And once they start liking it, I think they're on to a great journey.
Yeah, Madhu, I love that you're talking about the passion part of it. I think of my earliest mentors in life were my mom and dad. They very different personalities, completely different personalities, right? And my dad always instilled in me, whatever you do, have fun with it. My mom always instilled with me, whatever you do your best at it. And those two pieces of information from my very first mentors has really driven my life. It's allowed me to navigate, in addition to my other mentors that have really instilled a lot of information into me. But I let those two core pieces guide me. And it talks to the passion that you were just talking about. You can be the best at something, but if you're not passionate about it, if you're not happy or having fun with it, it shows. It shows on your technical execution, right? And you still might be good at it. In fact, you still might be doing your best at it, but you could be doing so much more if you have those two combined.
And just one other thing I wanted to add, like all of us here on the call or in the aerospace industry, STEM careers just go beyond just aerospace. When I was going to I was pursuing my PhD in computational electromagnetics, and I was going to try to be the ultimate math nerd. But then I realized, some of the stuff that I'm learning here in my PhD studies, this can also translate into other industries like finance, where they're trying to do algorithms for automated trading or using this stuff to develop robots. And now if you go into most retail stores, and I was in BJ's Wholesale Club here recently, and they have a robot called Tally that goes and does all the monitoring of the inventory, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So it's like there's so many things that you can do in STEM careers that where it gets used is totally not in industries that you would think someone with that kind of background could use them in.
You all mentioned the need for making that connection that leads you to the curiosity, finding out more about a particular subject or topic that leads you to learn more and continuing to learn. Because even as we're all here, senior career people, and even at our level, we need to continue to learn more. We talked about AI, Madhu. That's a new it's coming into the industry more and more now. And how are we going to find a path for that? How are we going to apply those kinds of skills that need to be learned yet? But curiosity and then having fun, that leads you to having that passion, and the passion leads you to performing at your best, bringing the best in you to perform those technical skills. And Neville, you mentioned also the skills that you learn in STEM also can translate to other areas. I really love all of that feedback. So now that we've explored the role of mentorship and how it plays in STEM careers, let's talk about how organizations and academic institutions can create programs that truly have a lasting impact on the next generation of professionals.
When organizations or even academia are trying to put together a mentorship, I'll call it program for lack of a better word, one key element that I think we overlook is the framework and teaching folks how to be a mentor. What is a mentor? And on the flip side, what is a mentee and how to be a mentee? Madhu mentioned, there's formal mentorship and informal mentorship. And I've had the privilege of being a participant in both as a mentor and a mentee in a formal mentorship type of program, and then informal mentorships that happen organically based on a connection with somebody. And again, I look back in my life and I can think back of so many people who were actually mentors to me without me even realizing that what was happening. And I think what we could really do when we look at academia or even organizations at large, the framework and structure, you can provide an outline of questions to ask as a mentor or as a mentee, things to look for in a mentor. But what we sometimes overlook is, what does that mean to be a mentor? And how do you tap into, as a mentor, how do you tap into all this great knowledge that you've received, quite frankly, from your experience, but also your mentors too. And again, passing it down. I mentioned earlier about that thread and pulling folks through. And it really is passing on that knowledge and things that you might have either found out on your own the hard way or the easier way because someone kind of helped guide you as well. And then as a mentee, how do you receive that information? How do you take that information from your mentors along the way? And what does that mean to you? When I mentor folks, whether it's a formal or informal mentorship relationship, I always say, go get more mentors. Go seek out more mentors. And so if you think about an organization or academia putting together like a program, I do think that it's great to have exposure to another individual who may have gone a similar route as you, but also a non-similar route from you. That diversity of thought is so critically important because it allows those mentors, I refer to them as my personal board of directors, that folks that I look to and have seen their growth or how they show up as an individual or a leader, and how do I pull in that information based on their experience, their exposure, their education, and then how do I pull that in and what does that mean for Wendy? And how do I take all those great pieces of information and how do I internalize that so I can perform not to replicate what they do or what they've done, but for myself. And what works for one person might not work for the other. And that's why you do need multiple mentors because you need to gather that information, that diverse thought and say, okay, here's what they would do. What does that mean to me? And how do I make sure I stay close to my values and my core values that are really what make me me, and then execute. And so learning how to be that mentee and receive that information, how to be a mentor and give that information is really what I think organizations and academia should focus on. Again, frameworks, you can look up frameworks, you can get structures of different programs that exist and questions to ask, but really empowering folks to step into a mentor role and letting them realize you are a mentor. Everyone can mentor because you're sharing that information. Gosh, I hope everyone's a mentee, right? Because that just means you're a student of life and pulling in that information. And if you forget those two pieces, that is kind of when you lose your path because now you're losing that community.
I talked about hackathons earlier. I think hackathons really excites students. It puts a healthy competition among the students because it's not that they should always win, but it's about the learning opportunity. Same thing about providing some critical topic panels. I think when we as the industry go to universities, we did that with the university. I went to George Mason University where we did multiple discussions about things happening in space exploration, things happening in AI. And the students actually had like a summer concentration courses where they actually presented papers back to us. Same thing, there is a lot of industry partnership on AI with Stanford, Carnegie Mellon. Again, these are all the things that, it really helps that academia as well as the industry partnership. And who are the big beneficiaries of that is the students. I think that's what we should empower and facilitate those things to take our kids forward and be the future innovators.
That's a great point, Madhu. You think about mentorship programs, and again, folks they think more of the, hey, I'm going to get a mentor, and here's a group of mentees. But to your point of making sure that there's panels, making sure that that exposure is there, and that's something that both academia and organizations can partner together, because when that is a form of mentorship, right? When you go to these panels and you're listening to these tidbits of information, not only are you gaining that education and exposure there, but quite frankly, that actually might spark a new relationship that you never knew before. And I could tell you there's so many folks that I've either reached out to when I see them on a panel or see them give a speech, and vice versa. If I've been on a panel, they reach out. And those connection points, it's a parallel effort that organizations and academia do that might not be the mentor program, but it allows for that connection point. It's a parallel effort that allows for the connection point for more mentoring and mentee relationships to develop. So I think it's critical for that to happen. And not just industry and academia, but internal to academia. I can think again, when I was an undergrad student especially, if I didn't have that community, if I didn't have the mentorship, whether it was what do we call it, upperclassmen, right, as a freshman and sophomore, and having that guidance and realizing, hey, they did it, I can do it too. that's also a really good form of mentorship and mentee as well. That again, the pull through.
Absolutely. And there are national societies, right? Professional societies that you can tap into. And that's also a parallel, I think, because when you go to the conferences, you can make so many connections with other people.
I say when you look at the academia, one thing that they potentially fail on is they have a prescriptive plan on how to deal with everything, but your students all have differing types of personalities, upbringings, etc. So they have to be able to modify their programs in order to get at the different socioeconomic groups. Men think differently than women. All those different aspects they need to also focus on to make sure they have a total comprehensive mentoring type program.
So, as we're closing our conversation here, I'm going to ask the last question here of all of you. What are the qualities that make a great STEM mentor? What are your thoughts about that?
I say some of those qualities. One, they have to be obviously knowledgeable in their area of expertise, but also somewhat knowledgeable in a lot of different areas and have good networks in those areas so that they can steer you to more people to have conversations with. And as I discussed on the last question, you want mentors with differing personalities. You almost want to have like a chameleon of sorts so they can look at it from multiple lenses and give you some advice from differing aspects. Because at least personally, I try to get mentors who are act just like me, and I want people who are totally the opposite of me to get the differing type of viewpoints. So when I'm in a situation, I know how to pivot quickly. One other thing I would say is someone's very passionate and who's an advocate for STEM. I say if you're not passionate, I can't imagine, looking out for me and giving me the best advice that's possible. And I'm also looking for someone who's an active listener. They need to understand someone's story before they go off and give advice. And they should also be open to telling their stories and how they got to where they're at, and talk about the pitfalls that they also face, because all of us have failed in some capacity at some point of our career.
I think one of the most important thing is the one of the most important quality I see, in addition to all the great things that Neville talked about, is giving back. I think we have a responsibility to give back to the community, and in our case for STEM, it's primarily the students. But at the same time, there are a lot of folks who may not be able to afford it. I think I look at the ways make it affordable to them and make it accessible to them. So sometimes we as mentors have to reach out. I think that's why going to schools and universities, it makes it easier for them. And also, what I've learned in the whole mentorship is it's one thing on the professional mentoring, but a lot of students are comfortable in their settings. So that's why going to their schools and colleges helps. And the other thing as a mentor I focus is start breaking some barriers. I think we have some significant digital divide in some cases, and we want to make sure that they feel comfortable with doing some uncomfortable things. I think, in fact, we are all facing that with AI, and not only students, but even as industry professionals, we're trying to figure out every day things are changing. So I always tell my mentees, whether formal or informal, it's okay to ask any question. If you're uncomfortable about something, please share. And we as mentors, I agree completely with Neville, we have to be I always use the 80-20 rule, be the good listeners. I think make sure you listen to them and help them navigate this complicated journey.
I think for me, a diversity of mentors, right? Having folks that may think similar to me, but also the ones that will think completely different from me are the ones who gives me the critical thinking of, I didn't think about that. Because if I already thought about it, then why do I need that extra guidance, right? And so that diverse mentor that might think different than me is always going to be a plus. I think also because we are perpetual learners as STEM professionals, that's a real big critical piece to being a good mentor. If a mentor if you tap back into your STEM foundations, that curiosity of what can be, what is, it allows you to pull in more information and thus being a stronger, I'll say more exposed individual that can give that to your mentees. So if you're an individual in STEM who really thinks that they've got it, right? They know it all. That's not going to be helpful to your mentees at large. I look to some STEM mentors who want to keep learning, because the more that they learn, right? If you're a mentor, the more you learn, the more you can pass on. And to Neville's point, definitely be vulnerable mentor. It's critically important to be okay if you don't know the answer. It's critically important to share your lived experience as a mentor, because a lot of your mentees are looking for that. They want to know, is this just me, or am I missing something? And when you have that individual as a mentor that you can bounce that lived experience, you know that you're not alone. So again, I think being vulnerable as a mentor, right, as an individual, that continuous learning. So the more the mentor learns, the more the student can learn, the more the mentee can learn, and really just having that connection, knowing that not everything is one answer, knowing that mentees, individuals, we're just so different. We think differently. We come from different backgrounds that are core biases that are innate in us. So as a good mentor, being able to explore various options. And if you don't have the answer, to Neville's point, tap into your network and pivot that mentee to your network as someone who might have an answer. And if you have all of those areas that you can tap to as a mentor, I think that is the best way I could look at mentorship, and not just in STEM, just in general.
Absolutely. And Wendy, Neville, and Madhu, thank you so much for sharing your insights with the Keys to the Future community. I know our listeners have taken away so much from this conversation.
Thank you, Gabby. I really appreciate being invited to this panel and this podcast discussion. I think it's such an important topic that we're addressing. And I love that you listen to all of us talk, and you can tap into each one of us saying, yeah, me too. And again, that's the whole power of sharing our lived experiences and growing together. So thank you, Gabby, for putting this all together. Really appreciate you.
Awesome. Thanks again, Gabby. I'm really glad that I was part of this panel with Wendy, Neville, and of course Gabby with you. And in almost all the panels, I always close out with recommending a couple of books, which is very important. I think one thing I would suggest is, while everybody's learning about STEM and everybody's talking about STEM, the soft skills are very important. So both for mentors and mentees. So one of the things I would like to recommend is Monday Morning Leadership by David Cottrell, 8 mentoring sessions you can't miss. I also recommend Atomic Habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break the bad ones, by James Clear. So again, thank you.
And I'll end with I'm just honored to be in front of 3 great people that I admire. If I did admire before, I admire them a hell of a lot more now. You know, we've all gone through the struggles. We all have used mentors to help us out in our careers. And if there's one takeaway from this, I say you don't have to do it alone. There are people out there who are willing to help you and make it easier for you going forward.
You're all so kind. And that's a wrap for today's episode. Don't forget to follow Keys to the Future on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more inspiring stories and industry insights. Until then, keep innovating and stay curious.